Hello everyone. In today's presentation, we're going to give you an overview on the interview preparation for the consulting industry. My name is Doğa Demirhan, and I'm a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group for 4 years. I joined the company after I graduated in 2016 from Bilkent Economics, and I've been working on the airlines and travel industry for the past 2 years. And before that, in the first 2 years, I've been quite diversified in terms of industry focus. I did consumer goods, industrial goods, finance, and many other industries, telco and automotive projects in the past 4 years. So what we're gonna do today is basically, as the Bilkent Economics Mentorship Program, we planned a series of seminars which focus on different industries like consulting, banking, telco, or consumer goods, and so on. And we plan to give industry presentations, preparation tips, and the key trend analysis for those industries. In today's presentation, we're going to focus on the preparation for consulting interview. As today's agenda is going to composed of 4 main steps. First is the consulting interview objectives. Then we're going to discuss the recruiting process and the interview setup. Then we're gonna deep dive in the case interview specifically, and then we will close with the tips and tricks. So to start with the consulting interview, the consulting interview basically aims to test your business judgment, quantitative skills, and your communication abilities. In the recruiting process and in the interview setup, how the firm is gonna test those 3 core skills are gonna made up by 3 key steps. So first step is a problem solving test, or sometimes it's a game which lasts for like 1 hour and it's mostly quantitative or logical focus. And then you will face with 2 interviews with mostly likely with the managers in the firm, and then you will finish with another 2 case interviews, one each with a partner in the firm. And after those 3 to 4 interview process, you will get the offer. So how does an interview look like is that an interview lasts around like an hour and composed of 3 steps. First step is the fit interview, which aims to test your motivation and discuss your past experiences, accomplishments, and see how fit you are to the culture. It's followed by a case interview, which is the core of the interview, which basically tests how well you frame a business problem, how well you demonstrate the quantitative skills, and how you communicate your key messages to the audience. After the case interview, as in all interviews, it comes a Q&A session, which basically you will find chance to ask your questions about the industry, about company, or personal experiences. You will get some tips from the interviewer and so on. Let's deep dive in the case interview a bit, which is the core part. So in the case interview, you will most likely have a real life business problem, or with a slight chance you can have like an estimation problem. And the aim of the interviewer is to understand basically how well you're questioning the problem, how well you're framing your solution, how fact-based your solution is, and how well you communicate your message, your end solution to the interviewer. And this interview mostly gonna be driven by yourself, while the interviewer is gonna be providing the answers to your questions. And it's gonna last approximately like 30 minutes. So you're expected to come up with a solution in 30 minutes. And so there are different ways to approach to a case, but once you are in a case interview, there are some basic frameworks that you can follow, regardless of the type of the question. So in a general framework, basically, what you can do is that you can first start with understanding the context, which we call qualitative assessment, where you understand the company, its product offering, its customer types, and the market that it serves. And then it comes the solution generation part, which we may call quantitative assessment. In the quantitative assessment, you basically deep dive in the analysis and find the solution for the client's problem. After you find the solution, before you conclude, you evaluate certain risks associated with your solutions, and then you communicate your recommendations together with the supporting facts under the light of those risks. So let's deep dive a bit on the context understanding, the first step. So in the context understanding, we basically use a four-dimensional approach, which consists of company, product, customer, and competition assessments. You can apply this almost all kind of cases, either it's pricing or new market entry or M&A or cost cutting, whatever. It's key to understand the context, and it's key to basically um, assess different parts of the different components, different elements of the context individually. Those elements, let's start with the company. So what do we do to understand the company is that we ask questions about the basic financials like revenues, profits, and cost. We ask for those figures for this year and past year if it's relevant. And then we understand the capabilities of the company better, such as the production facilities, number of employees, the qualification of the workforce, etc. And we understand better the vision and the image of the company. Once we have a clear picture of company, we move to products. In the products, the objective is to basically get a sense of the key product segments of the client, and to see how big each segment is and what are the growth rates of those product segments. After we have a clear view on the product portfolio, we do the similar thing for the customers. So we segment the customers. We learn about the customer base. We size each customer segment, and we learn about their growth rates. And then we understand better on specific customer segments preferences. So after this, we basically pretty much know quite a lot about the company's product and customer portfolio. Then it comes to the last part, which is the competition, which is an external view, while the first three components were more internal view. On external view, we ask questions about the main competitors, learn who they are, and then try to understand what the client's competitive advantage is. Remember that for a business to succeed, it's crucial to have a competitive advantage, and knowing this competitive advantage will help us a lot to generate our solution for the case later on. So to generate the solution for this case, we basically apply different methods depending on the case type. You may have different types of cases in your interview, which can mostly be around those 5 things. So it can be either a new product launch in a new market or in an existing market. It can be a profitability decline or profitability recovery case. It can be a new market entry. It can be a growth strategy problem, or it can be a pricing problem. So we have different frameworks, we have different methodologies to apply in those cases. So let's start with the new product launch or new market entry, which follow pretty much the same framework. So in terms of solution generation, remember that those frameworks are in the step solution generation, which is the second step of the general framework. As the part of the solution generation for new product launch and new market entry, what we do is first, we understand the potential demand and growth in that demand for that product or in that market that we like to enter. And then we find out the client's competitive advantage. Remember that we already questioned this in the previous step, which was the context understanding. But in this step, we deep dive on that, and then we define exactly how the client differentiates from its peers. And then we calculate the quantity needs to be sold to meet the objectives of the clients. This quantity with the set price is gonna give us the expected revenues. So what we're gonna use this expected revenue for is gonna be, we're gonna compare our costs with the expected revenues, and then we will evaluate it and we will define whether this investment is feasible or not, depending on whether the client will meet its financial objective with this investment. If the quantity for a given price that we set is sufficient to provide enough revenues to meet the client's objectives, then it's going to be a feasible investment. Otherwise, it's not. The second type of case can be a profitability case. So in the profitability case, when it comes to solution generation, what we can follow is a 3-step path. The first step is that we will lay out the drivers of profitability and their evolution over the past years to find the problematic drivers. So at this point, it's important to segment the customers and products and identify if there is a really specifically problematic one to deep dive. Either we deep dive on a specific customer or product segment, or we analyze the client's profitability as a whole. What we do to analyze the profitability is to break it down into its components, which are revenues and costs, and then break down even further, which we can divide revenues into quantity sold and average price, while we can divide costs as fixed and variable. Now, under the fixed cost, we will have some items like marketing, equipment, facilities, insurance, and so on, while on the variable cost, we will have like raw material or energy costs. And after assessing those profitability drivers and quantifying them, we will deep dive in the root causes of those drivers and try to find what are the key reasons leading to problematic changes in those profitability drivers. After identifying the main reasons, the root causes of the problem, of the key changes in the profitability drivers, in other words, we will check if those reasons are due to the factors that can be managed by the client or whether they are due to external factors that cannot be managed by the client. If they're manageable by the client, then we will define a clear action plan for the client to fix the problems. We will brainstorm a bit here. So it can be like, let's say, if the problem is because the client's costs are increasing on the revenue on the variable side, then maybe we can try to find a new deal with a new supplier to basically lower down the unit cost. Or on the other hand, if the reason for the profit decline is due to an external factor, such as a decline in the consumer income due to a currency depreciation, which the client cannot easily impact, then we will try to generate ideas to minimize those factors' effect on the client's business. So what can be in this example, like maybe trying to find an alternative market that's not exposed to currency risk, or alternatively trying to differentiate the product that is affected less by the currency depreciation. The third most common type of case is the growth strategy case. So in the solution generation part of growth strategy, what we will do is we will first start with setting up a growth framework using market and product dimensions. This framework will look like a matrix actually. So imagine that on the x-axis, on the horizontal axis, you will have the market. On the vertical axis, on the y-axis, you will have the product. And if you have on the left, on the x-axis, on the market side, if you are in the existing market, and if you want to grow with an existing product, we can call it penetration, market penetration. So you further penetrate into the market with the existing product. If you're in an existing market with a new product, if you want to grow with a new product, you basically call this product development. On the other hand, if your market is new and your product is an existing product, so you're trying to launch your existing product to a new region, we call this market expansion. While when you try to launch a new product in a new market, we'll call it diversification. So there are different, of course, advantages and disadvantages of those four scenarios, but those are the main four growth options that a company can follow. So after laying out this matrix, we'll check with the interviewer if the client had already evaluated any of those options to narrow down our focus. And mostly the interviewer helps us to pick the right one here because it takes quite a lot of time to evaluate all options. And if the client or the interviewer directs us to a specific option, Then what we will do is we will understand the potential demand that we will have if we follow that option. We will find out the client's competitive advantage. We will calculate the quantity need to meet the client's objective, and then we will decide if this investment is feasible. So as you might notice, those four steps are the same steps that we followed in the new product launch or new market entry project in the cases. So as you can also notice, those four options are quite related to new market entry or new product launch. So you can have quite a lot of um, similarities in different types of cases. So once you set up a framework and once you practice enough, you can follow a similar structure to solve pretty much almost all of the questions. Going back to our point in step three. So after checking with the interviewer whether the client already evaluated any of those options, those growth options, if the client doesn't specify any option for us, we will assess each option separately by basically asking some related questions and testing the interviewer's response. And then once we've identified the right growth option, we will deep dive on that one. So we now close the first two steps, which were the context understanding and solution generation. On that, in other words, qualitative assessment and quantitative assessment. After quantitative assessment, ideally, we will have a clear solution to the problem, and we will already have the supporting facts in mind to back up our solution. But before we conclude, there is an important step that needs to be mentioned, and that's missed actually by most candidates, which is risk assessment. So risks basically vary based on the problem and the context of the case, but there are some common areas that you can check to assess, to evaluate the potential risks. What are those? Are like there can be risks related to demands, there can be risk related to regulations or competition. So on the demand side, the economic development may lead to a decline in the customer income, such as currency depreciation, or industry trends may put the future demand at risk. On the other hand, regulations are always important in terms of business risk. There might be some tightening regulations that can basically increase your cost in the future, or there can be some competition laws that may restrict either your pricing or your acquisition or your other business activities in the market. And finally, the competition is also worth to check in terms of risk assessment, because the competition may get even fancier with the new entrants, especially if it turns out that the market is attractive after your entry or after your activities. So those are the key things to check on the risk side. And after we get the risks done, and then after we basically discuss the risks with the interviewer, then we can conclude our case. In conclusion, it's very important that you have one clear recommendation, one sentence recommendation, with two or three supporting facts based on the figures and insights you generated during the case. To give a concrete example, let's think of a real estate firm who wants to enter the Chinese market. Imagine that you assessed the market, you understood the demand, and then you found out that the demand is quite high and growing excessively. You deep dive on the company and you realize that the company's, the client's competitive advantage is its high tech, the new generation technology that it's using to build high quality infrastructure and buildings with a very low cost. Then you combine this with the market growth, and then you conclude that with this demand and the growth rates, given the client's competitive advantage, the clients can generate $3 billion in total in the next 5 years. And let's assume that the client's investment cost initially and in total, the total cost sum up to $2 billion. Then you will have $1 billion revenues, profit, $1 billion profit, while the client has an initial objective of $500 million in the total of 5 years. You see that the profits that the client expected to generate are $1 billion, which is double of the initial objective. So you conclude the case and say that we recommend the client to enter the Chinese market because of the following reasons. First of all, the expected profit for the client in the next 5 years is $1 billion, which is the double of its initial objective of 500 million. Second, the Chinese real estate market is at XXX billion-dollar size with growth rate of Y%, which is quite healthy and big. And third, you mentioned the risks, and if you already evaluated and found out that there is no risk, you say there is no significant risk in terms of either competition or demand or the regulations that may put the client's plans at risk. That's it. So that we cover the interview objectives, setup, and the case interview. And just to give you some tips and tricks, we'll mention what are the things that you would like to do in the interview and what are the things that you won't. So before you go to an interview, basically, it's very crucial to do some research about the interviewer, about the firm's recent projects, and about the firm's culture. It's especially important that you build a personal connection with the interviewer. Basically, if you know her better ahead of the interview, you can ask more to the point questions, or you can basically highlight some important accomplishments or experiences of yours that can link to her experiences. If you know better about the firm's projects, you can draw some strong connections with your experiences and the firm's current projects, current work. And if you know their culture, you can basically stand out in the fit part of the interview, and then you can show them that you are the right candidate, not just in terms of business skills, but also in terms of the cultural fit. The second important aspect of an interview is the communication and presence. So some very useful tips there is that being very clear and to the point is very crucial for a fresh candidate, because the interviewer will see you just for like an hour, and most of this part is gonna focus on the technical assessment, like a case interview. So there will be some points, some stages of this interview that you will find chance to interact with the interviewer. And in those points, The clearer you are, the easier for the interviewer to understand you and remember you. And in consulting, it's quite important to give a crisp message and be to the point in the communication. Another tip related to presence can be, of course, dress formal. We see some candidates like not wearing suits or not wearing ties and so on, which are quite common in the business world, but not if you're a candidate actually. So it's better to dress up. And of course, it's very important to see it as a friendly conversation rather than a super serious interview, because consulting in the end is about a teamwork, and people like to be with people. People would like to work with people that they can make friends, because they will be spending a lot of time together. So just show that you're not a quite serious and boring guy, but just more a friendly person that think you can talk about any topic. This is called actually airport test, which is very famous. Like there is a very famous scenario that you will be taking a lot of flights together with the team, and you will be also missing a lot of flights with the team. So once you miss a flight and have to wait for the next flight in 3 hours, you will spend just like 3 hours chatting about random stuff at the airport. At that part, it's very important to be able to talk about different stuff. So be friendly, be talkative, outgoing. It's quite crucial in the succeed in consulting. Lastly, a feedback is a very important part that basically most candidates overlook, but it's very important to ask for a feedback and ask questions basically also to learn about the firm. So the first one, the feedback is more focused on your performance, your evolution during the case interview. And the second is more to understand better about the culture, about the industry. And it's very crucial because people would like their ideas to be appreciated. So asking feedback show people that you appreciate their opinion. And also people would like to talk about themselves, their firm, their business, and so on. So it actually will motivate them also to spend time with you to get a positive impression about yourself. And of course, the more you know about the firm, the know you more about the other person, the better for you to make your decision or prepare for the next interview. So it was, in a nutshell, the key facts to take into account to prepare for a case interview. Thank you very much for listening, and wishing you the best